Hey Encino, looking for low prices on grocery favorites? Find them at your refreshed Amazon Fresh grocery store. Whether you're picking up this week's grocery haul or today's hot lunch, Amazon Fresh is your spot to save big. Head to amazon.com/grocery store opening for info on upcoming store events, this week's deals, and more. Find savings as far as the aisle can see at your refreshed Amazon Fresh in Encino on Ventura Boulevard.
Blog Talk Radio. Blog Talk Radio.
Live from Los Angeles, the Win Without Competing Show with Dr. Arlene Barrow, Career Coach 1 and author of Win Without Competing. Now, here's Dr. Arlene.
Thank you, Virgil. In tough economic times, it is especially important to implement my Right Fit method, which will enable you to win without competing in your career and in your life. I carefully select my guests who are powerful users of my Right Fit method. A key component of that method is passion, our career fuel, the impetus and foundation of career success. My guest today, Suzanne DeLaurentiis, is soaked in passion, but passion is not enough. Suzanne and my other guests know how to harness their passion. They excel in managing the process and walking down the right fit road to reach their goals. They know how to recognize right fits. They know how to recognize wrong fits. They know whether they can fix or not fix a wrong fit. They know when to walk away. They assume responsibility for their successes and failures. They say to themselves, "It's all up to me." Throughout my own career as a medical school dean to heading a $60 million education program at the National Institutes of Health, and as the founder and CEO of Barrow Global Search, Inc., I have observed that figuring out right fits is extremely difficult for many people to do. As a result, they continue taking the wrong fit road and wonder why they are in wrong fit marriages, wrong fit careers, or wrong fit homes. The solution is simple. Stop asking who is the best and what is the best. Stop comparing and contrasting. If all your choices are wrong and you pick one, which you designate as the best, you made a wrong choice. Picture a barrel of rotten apples. Grab the best one. What do you have? A rotten apple. To learn more about my Right Fit method, continue listening to today's show, and after the show, visit winwithoutcompeting.com to read excerpts from my book. On to my guest today, independent filmmaker Suzanne DeLaurentiis, head Suzanne DeLaurentiis Productions. DeLaurentiis follows in the footsteps of her family of successful filmmakers, producers, and directors. Her company, Suzanne DeLaurentiis Productions, independently produced 10th and Wolf, Brothers by Blood, Silicon Towers, Pocket Ninjas, Skate Dragons, Twin Towers, Graduation Day, Out of the Black, Shut Up and Kiss Me, A Month of Sundays, The Vegas Connection, Mutant Man, Swiss Family Robinson, Mannequin 2, Rocky 5. Transylmania, and New Hope Manor, as well as many others. The film, Tenth and Wolf, a drama based on the investigations of mob informant Joe Postone, a.k.a. Donnie Brasco, won numerous awards. Suzanne DeLaurentiis has won the prestigious Opal Award from Women in Film, a Lifetime Award for Music in Independent Films from the Hollywood Fame Awards, and the Distinguished Founders Award for Excellence in Filmmaking from the Palm Beach International Film Festival. DeLaurentiis started the Cinema City International Film Festival, which debuted at Universal Studios in 2007 and was rated one of the top 25 film festivals by MovieMaker Magazine in the festival's second year. She conducts lectures and workshops, mentoring up-and-coming actors and filmmakers. Suzanne has helped hundreds of talented people jumpstart their careers. At the Hyatt Regency Century Plaza, the 5th Cinema City International Film Festival took place in September, featuring the film Like Dandelion Dust, starring Barry Pepper, Cole Hauser, and Mira Sorvino. I am delighted to report that I attended this outstanding event. I will unravel Suzanne DeLaurentiis' fascinating career from her childhood roots to her teenage acting career to her acclaimed singing nightclub act. At age 20, she was mentored by cousin Frankie Avalon to acclaimed filmmaker. Welcome, Suzanne, to Win Without Competing.
Well, thank you very much, Dr. Barrett. It's just a pleasure to be on the air with you this evening.
My pleasure as well. You were born and raised in New Jersey. What did your parents do?
My father was a former pro football player, and then he was retired and a school teacher and a guidance counselor. He also headed up a work program in the high school. And my mother was a teacher and writer and kind of a part-time stay-at-home mom.
What was your family home life like as you were growing up?
I have very fond memories of my childhood, Dr. Barrow. I had great parents. We always had plenty of things to do. We weren't sort of the kind of sit-around, docile type family that didn't do much. We always had a lot of get up and go, a lot of activities, and we inherited, I should say, a lot from my father. But my sister and I were both very aggressive, ambitious, and tenacious, kind of head-banging AAA personalities. Very much so.
Now, your sister, was she older or younger?
My sister, her name is Jean DeLaurentiis, and she was 3 years older than me.
Is she also in the filmmaking arena?
Actually, my sister had a degree in marketing, and she did help me with some distribution earlier in my career when I was making independent films, but now she's a very successful real estate agent.
Even in these troubled times, she's successful. That's outstanding.
Yeah, very much so. She's held her own and has done very well. We all kind of have that workaholic, successful gene running through our veins.
Well, I think it's wonderful. At what age was your passion for the arts seeded?
I'd have to say I was pretty young, 7, 8, 9 years old, dance and ballet and getting involved in arts and theater in school, and I always had a passion for music and for the arts.
Now, did your parents encourage that? Did they take you to all kinds of events as you were growing up? Did you listen to music at home?
Oh, very much so, and I was very fortunate. I grew up in Mount Holly, New Jersey. It had a very good school system where the schools were acclimated to performing arts and arts programs. So I stayed very active in school, and as you had mentioned, my cousin was Frankie Avalon. So I grew up with my father and my mother taking us to see Frankie playing in the nightclub. So I was sort of very tapped into the music business at an early age going to see him.
How did you feel? I mean, what was the age difference approximately?
Frankie was closer to my mother's age, so I was pretty young in the late 60s and early 70s when Frankie was very popular on the nightclub circuit, but he still is. I mean, he still has a terrific show, and I still go to see him whenever I can, but it was thrilling and wonderful, and of course, being related, I always said to my parents, well, that's what I want to do. I want to be a singer, I want to be an actress, I want to be in the nightclub business, I want to be in movies. That was a nice jumping off for me to say, yes, I want to do what he does.
So he was a wonderful role model for you then.
Well, yes, and it was nice because he, at that time growing up, he was very popular. So, he was very much in the spotlight, and, I kind of followed his career and things that he was doing and things that he was involved in.
I know that he was an important influence. Who else influenced you and mentored you?
Well, Dino DeLaurentiis, of course, was a huge idol for me. I really didn't get too much, I can't say I really had too much experience mentoring with him. I did work at his studio down in North Carolina in the early 80s, but, I was certainly aware of him and, knew what his accomplishments were and, sort of idolized him as a filmmaker. But gosh, there were so many. I idolized Ed Wood and Roger Corman, and I kind of liked sort of the independent, sort of offbeat things. Orson Welles I was a big fan of. So there were quite a few people in the late 60s and early 70s and late 70s when I was growing up that I thought very much of.
Now, Dino was a cousin. Is that correct, Suzanne?
Yes, a distant cousin, yes.
Now, I know when we talked prior to the show, you had mentioned that your mother had an autoimmune disease.
Yes.
Can you tell us about that and how that influenced your development?
Well, oddly enough, when people ask me about that, I had a great mother. She was always there for me. I have to say I owe a lot of my success to her support and her always being, my biggest fan. But I remember years of her being in bed a lot, or, she always had these elaborate birthday parties for me growing up, and then she'd be in bed 2 days later because she'd be inflamed and not feeling well. So it wasn't unusual for me to have my mother not feeling well. She didn't feel well a lot. However, as I mentioned to you before, her favorite expression was, if I didn't feel well, if I didn't do anything because I didn't feel well, I'd never do anything. So she was sort of my mentor then when I was diagnosed later on, of just always moving forward and doing what you wanted to do no matter how bad you feel.
Now, when you were diagnosed with lupus?
Well, then it was still a gray area. Lupus wasn't so much of a disease as it was a symptom of, of several different things. And basically, autoimmune system is when your body makes too many antibodies, so it starts attacking itself. It attacks your organs and your healthy tissues. So it kind of runs the gamut. Technically, it's autoimmune system / lupus, but basically, it's an overactive autoimmune system.
Now, you were age 21 when you were diagnosed.
Yeah, it's like early 20s, as I remember, early 20s. Mm-hmm.
How did you respond recognizing what your mother had gone through, even though she had an outstanding attitude, obviously, and didn't let it keep her down? How did you respond?
I'll admit at first it was a little devastating for me, just because I was so used to just, like I said, AAA, go, go, go personality, very excitable, very high-strung. I wanted to accomplish a million things, and it was sort of hitting the wall. Well, now these are things that you can't do. You can't work an 18-hour day anymore. You have to take breaks. You have to take naps. You have to take medication. You're going to have periods where you have to have surgery to fix things, and these things won't work. And at first it was pretty hard. I remember going through a pretty bad depression there for a little while, maybe for a year, but I was very fortunate to have a terrific therapist that sort of taught me as well how to, stand on my feet and just not let it affect me. And even to this day, and that was, in the mid-'80s, even till this day, I still use a lot of her techniques to get me through some of the bad days. And I used to read a lot of Louise L. Hay books. Yes, very, very helpful. So
you were very lucky to have her in your life.
Yes. Yes.
And your mother, how did she respond, and how did she support you?
Well, kind of the nice thing, which is still the case between us, is that we used to get all these kooky, strange ailments, just strange things that were very hard to diagnose. And no matter what I would have, she would say, "Oh, I had that," or "I know what that's like." And it's just kind of, I guess, a buddy system for me, that there was always someone there who knew exactly what I felt like and knew exactly, what I was going through. And that's important, because I think a lot of people that are afflicted with incurable diseases, some of them don't have family members or people that they know that are in that situation all the time. So sort of to a degree, I was very fortunate that I had that support with her.
Now, tell us about the times that you were appearing on Broadway, early when you were young, and about the shows in which you appeared.
Well, in my early teens, opera was really important to me. I was studying classically at PCPA with Gloria Leiholtz, who was from the Philadelphia Academy of Performing Arts, and I wanted to study opera in New York, and Carla Manate, who was at Carnegie Hall, who was the best of the best, had trained a lot of big stars, Diana Ross, Barbra Streisand, just about everybody, including my cousin Frankie Avalon. I was able to get an audition with him through Frankie, and I got accepted. So while I was studying with him, I was always auditioning for shows in the city and trying to get in shows in the city. And as I mentioned before, I was lucky enough to work with Steve Allen, who was just a brilliant, brilliant talent. I did his show, This Could Be the Start. After that, I did a lot of bus and truck tours, Stop the World, I Want to Get Off, and then some of the other musicals, Celebration, Sound of Music, Fiddler on the Roof. Those were all big shows in the 70s, so I had quite a lengthy a career in kind of the musical theater realm.
And then also, too, you were in film and on television.
Mm-hmm.
What did you enjoy about the theater and film and television that helped to sort of set the stage for your future?
Well, I mean, obviously anybody who has a passion for the arts loves to perform. And at that time, the performing was very important to me. It really was my love and my passion. And then I think I got to a point where I started to feel not frustrated, but I think I felt that I wasn't in control of sort of my destiny or my situation, because as you know, when you're a performer, you kind of have to rely on other people giving you an opportunity. You have the whole audition circuit, and you're always trying to get your work, and you're always waiting for someone to, quote unquote, discover you or notice you or give you an opportunity. So I kind of felt like I wanted to be in a different position where I was creating my own opportunity, and I sort of didn't have to rely on other people to grant me the opportunity of being in their shows or being in their movies. And that's when I got into writing and directing and producing.
Well, I think that Blog Talk Radio was correct when they featured you today as a Today's Pick on the homepage. And underneath your photo, the photo of you and Tenth and Wolf, they titled it Woman in Charge. And I believe that they are absolutely correct, because early on you're basically saying that you wanted to manage the process. And that's a key component of my right fit method. Mm-hmm. So I'm delighted that you recognize this in yourself, because sometimes people continue working for others, not understanding why they're so frustrated.
Right. That's actually, Dr. Barrow, a very good point. Whenever I'm mentoring young people or lecturing, the first thing people say to me is, well, what do you suggest I do? What do? I don't know what to do. And I tell them you have to do things on your own. You can't rely on other people and working at other companies and that hoping that someone's going to notice you or promote you or give you the things that you want out of your career. You have to do it on your own. So that was a perfect fit for me. I didn't want to spend the next 10, 20 years of my career waiting for someone to give me an opportunity. I was going to create the opportunities for myself.
Do you think that mindset had an effect on your becoming or not becoming an opera singer?
Well, I think, in the late 70s, opera was a very different animal than it is now. It was much more regimented, much more restricted. It wasn't nearly as commercial as it is now. I mean, I think some of the opera companies or the classical companies I had looked into in Manhattan in the late 70s were paying $9 a week. And at the time I was singing in Atlantic City in the late 70s and early 80s and in the casinos and making, $1,000 or $2,000 a week. So at that time, the opera and the classical singing was very important to me, but, I had other things I wanted to do in my life, and I knew I wouldn't be able to do those things unless, I was in a financial position where maybe I could take some risks that other people maybe wouldn't take.
Do you do any singing now at all?
Yes, I do. I don't really perform too much publicly anymore. I mean, occasionally I will if the opportunity is right, but not as much as I would like to. I think as I'm getting a little older now, I'll probably go back to maybe doing some more singing, but unfortunately the movie business is extremely time consuming, so I spend most of my time working in film now and the film festival.
In terms of Frankie Avalon, take us back to your nightclub act at age 20. How did he help you and encourage you to do that?
Well, my father would have conversations with him. I would as well. And, he would say, if you want to do it, you have to do it. If that's what you want to do, get some musicians together, get a band, write your show. And at the time, my mother was my manager, was starting to manage me more, and she had a lot of connections in Atlantic City. So it actually wasn't a very difficult transition for me to get into the nightclub business. And using Frankie's name at times if, there were some rooms I wanted to get into. And at the time, his manager was Dick Fox, and my father would talk to him occasionally, and he would give him advice. But again, you have to do it on your own. You can't sit around and wait for other people to give you opportunity. You have to do it on your own.
So for how long did you actually do that? Was that a short-term gig, or how did that all work?
I did it for about 5 or 6 years. I did it full-time, probably I would say for 2 or 3 years, but, my mother, being my manager at the time, had given me some good advice and said, look, if you really want to be in the film business and that's what you want to do, you've got to get out of the nightclub business because this is where you'll be the rest of your life. And she was right. A lot of my other friends that, were in that type of business are still there, and I'm so glad that, I kind of rolled the dice and left maybe a somewhat steady, lucrative employment situation to take risks and start making small independent films and kind of going that route.
Before you started your own company in 1984, you were an accomplished writer, producer, and director of short films, commercials, and music videos.
Yes.
Where did you work, and what did you learn about yourself as you were working for others? Because you mentioned early on it wasn't for you.
Right. That's kind of interesting, Dr. Barrow. I took whatever I could get in the beginning. Someone would say to me, well, I'm a singer and I have this idea for a music video, and you name it, I took it. And commercials, I knew people at different companies that said, well, we have these ideas from these commercials. I would undercut everybody else. Even if I didn't make any money, it didn't matter. I just wanted to build a resume and get some experience under my belt. And then, I did work as a line producer in UPM for other companies. But, as I had mentioned before in our earlier conversations, it was important to me to have a nice, pleasant working atmosphere. When I went to work, and some of the other production companies sort of had that rigid stigma, old saying, you could cut it with a knife. It was so stressful, and it just wasn't for me. I wanted to have a much different environment, and then that's when I decided, well, I'm going to have my own company because I want to be able to give up-and-coming people opportunities, and I want to have more of a pleasant work. I mean, believe me, I'm tough at getting what I need to get, and it's important that we make our days, but I like people to be in somewhat of a pleasant atmosphere.
If you would ask some of the people who work with you to describe how you work with people, what would they say?
Well, I think they would probably say, obviously, I'm extremely aggressive, go-getter. I like to, everybody to get a lot accomplished in one day. We move pretty quickly, and maybe you call it a little bit of attention deficit. But I'm a mover and shaker, and if I staying in a situation that's taking too long, or I'm always ready to move on and move ahead. So I think at times some people may make the comment about I go a little too fast, but that's just my personality. I'm a go type of gal.
Now, how is that affect in terms of that approach, the go? Mm-hmm. How has that changed over the years?
I'm trying to kind of keep that at a minimum. I truly do. I know one of the things I was criticized for in business was I had to cut my list down because I would get up every morning and make this long 20-page list of everything I want to accomplish in that day. And if I went to bed and there were 5 things on the list that weren't accomplished, I would think it was the end of the world. So I'm a little past that now. My lists are only 1 page long. So I'm a little better than I used to be.
Well, that's good.
Yeah.
That's good. You've changed where you've placed your bar, so to speak.
Yes.
So
but that took learning. Someone had to teach me how to do that.
So now, how did someone actually teach you that, or you recognized it yourself?
Well, I knew that was a little bit of a problem, and I did have to have someone say, look, this is how you have to, sometimes you have to take a deep breath and stop. You have to allow yourself breaks. You have to, take some downtime. And that's important for everyone, I believe, as human beings. We have to do that. But then again, I love what I do. So it's not like, oh, my gosh, I have to go to work this week. How horrible. I can't wait to go on vacation. Even when I do go on vacation, I take scripts with me. I make notes about ideas I have. So I don't know. I guess it's kind of the lesser of two evils for me.
Well, your head is always racing, right?
Yes.
Isn't that what's going on? Yeah. When you're highly creative, that's what happens. Your head doesn't stop.
Right. Yes, very much so.
Now, when we also talked before the show, you told me that you recognized when you first started working, prior to establishing your own company, that you have a talent for raising money.
Yes.
I'd love to hear what the secrets are. After all, there's only the two of us here. Okay. What are your secrets in terms of how you package yourself to pitch? Because that's a frequent thing that people find very difficult to do.
Right. Yes, it is. I wish I had a good answer for you. I guess I've probably raised over $100 million in my career, not only for my own projects, but helping people with other projects. I think because I never let an opportunity go by. I remember a funny circumstance where I was having some surgery for my lupus. I was being wheeled into the operating room, and the anesthesiologist was saying, so what do you do for a living? And I said, well, I'm a movie producer. I'm independent. And he said something like, "Oh, gee, I always found that interesting. I always thought that might be something that, I want to get involved in." And then it was kind of like, the other doctors were laughing. I was like, wait a minute, don't put me to sleep yet. Let's talk about this. You sort of, you kind of, I guess with me, I sort of throw out the ball and it just sticks with people. And then, but then too, I've worked hard over the years of my career gaining a reputation that people are very happy with, with the movies that they get made, and I'm one of the few independents that does development. Not everybody does that. So, I'll have a client call me and say, I've had a fascinating life. I want to turn it into a movie. What do I do? And not a lot of people have that at their companies or offer that. So that's always very enticing for investors that, they can have absolutely nothing except a great story and sit down over dinner and pitch it to me for an hour, and then I can say to them, you know what, I think we have something here. So that's a little bit of a luxury for me. But in answer to your question, I don't know. I guess I just have that that knack, that sales knack or something. I don't know.
Well, obviously, if you've raised more than $100 million, you have a pretty darn good sales knack here. I mean, it's. Do you think that you observed anyone along the way that excelled in pitching?
I would have to say my father was terrific at sales. He was super aggressive, ambitious. He's passed away now, but I kind of joke with my mother, I'm so much like him. He was a hustler as far as working hard and always making a buck, and he just had tons of tenacity, and he was aggressive and ambitious, and I'm very much like him.
Now, you're very much committed to being an independent filmmaker.
Yes.
And you basically indicated early on that you had a blueprint of the right fit business. Mm-hmm. Could you articulate the components of your blueprint?
Well, several factors were important to me in my business. Number one, it was important to me that people were happy in their working atmosphere and happy with their job, because when people are happy, they perform better. I've always had that, that saying that if people are really happy, then they're going to be terrific. And if people feel good about what they do and they're congratulated and complimented on a good job, they're only going to do a better job. And it was important to me that I could do what I wanted to do. If I wanted to make a $100,000 horror movie, that's what I'm going to make, if that's what I feel like making in the spring. And if I feel like doing a $15 million mafia drama, then that's what I'm going to make. And I never really followed a criteria of people saying, well, you have to do things like this, or these are the kind of movies you have to make, and these are the people that have to work with you. I always sort of did what worked best for me, and in turn, it worked best for the company.
I think that kind of gets into your brand. Would you agree?
Oh, very much so. Very much so.
Tell us about your brand.
Well, as I mentioned before, we're very strong in development at my company. And when people say to me, well, how do you get a movie made, or how does it get off the ground, it's the development period that's important. When people say to me, well, how do you get someone to write a check for $4 or $5 million to make a movie? Well, because the movie's ready to go. It's a terrific written script. All the business plans are in line. The actors are attached. The locations are nailed down. Everything is ready to go in that year or 2 year development period. And I kind of feel like that's sort of the strong point of the branding of my company, is that anything that we're ready to go into pre-production or ready to raise money for could start shooting the next day. And not many other companies have that. When they're out raising money, they're still working on their pitch, or they're just getting the script together. And personally, if I was an investor, I'd be very leery about handing someone a check for $10 or $12 million if they weren't absolutely had all their ducks in a line and were ready to go. And that's one of the strong points, I feel like, the branding in my company that has made me so successful over the years.
Well, you'll be delighted to know that I think I figured out something about your talent for raising money. And that is, if the development is so strong, I mean, that you
Right.
set the stage to such an extent that production is, you're ready just to jump into it. Am I correct that you use that as a basis to help you raise money?
Oh, absolutely. And I also pride myself on organization, which is so important. And I always teach this to young people. If I have 2 or 3 movies going at once or 2 or 3 clients that I'm dealing with, you always return their phone call within 5 minutes. You always answer an email within that day. Communication is key whenever you're dealing with people with money. And I think that's the biggest, some of the mistake that young filmmakers make is that they don't always keep that organization of contact. Not to mention the fact it's very important, Dr. Barrow, which I pride myself on, is that when you say you're going to do something, you do it. And it's not 2 weeks later or 5 months later. If you say to someone, today is Monday, by Wednesday, this is going to be signed, sealed, and delivered, and in front of you, that it's done. And that, I find, is the most important thing with raising money in clients, is that when you say you're going to do something, you follow through, and it's done when you say it's going to be done.
That way you've developed trust.
Yes, very much so.
And I expect you probably have long-term relationships, too, with the people that have been providing the money over the years.
Yes, as well as my vendors and people that provide production services for me as well, because that's always a sticking point for people. You know, a lot of independent producers at times have trouble paying their bills, or vendors aren't paid on time, or people are calling for their money, and we're just the opposite. Most of the time I pay my clients and vendors in advance, so they trust me, and they know if I say, again, you know, that I'm going to do something, they know I'm going to do it and follow through.
What motivated you to start the Cinema City International Film Festival?
I think because I've been on the board of other big successful film festivals, and believe me, they're fabulous. My mother and I used to drag around to festivals together, and I had the pleasure of being honored at quite a few over the last couple years. But I just felt that, you know, there were things that I could do that would be a little more beneficial for independent filmmakers. For example, whenever I would go to other film festivals, the filmmakers could never walk the red carpet and do press. It was only the big celebrities. And at the big award shows, you know, the big celebrities were being honored and getting awards, and the independent filmmakers were just kind of sitting in the background watching. So it was important to me at my festival that all the filmmakers walked the red carpet, and they all got, you know, the press and publicity, and would leave the festival with press kits that would help them in turn raise money. And at our awards ceremony and gala, we have the big celebrities give awards to the filmmakers instead of the celebrities getting the awards, so that the filmmakers get the press and PR with the celebrities. And we also raise money for severely injured American soldiers returning from Afghanistan and Iraq, so that's a passion of mine as well. So I just kind of wanted to do things a little different.
Well, I think the fact that you're a divergent thinker has obviously had a tremendous impact on your career. You don't think like everyone else. You want to do things differently.
Right. That's actually my favorite saying is think out of the box. If you want to get ahead, think out of the box.
Have you had success in terms of imparting that to the young people that you've been mentoring? Do they get it?
You know, that's an interesting question. Some do and some don't. Unfortunately, when you're dealing with people who are the left brain is the creative side of the brain, isn't that right? Isn't it?
I think so, yeah.
You're left-brained. So when you have somebody who's very, very creative, sometimes their ego gets tricky, and, you know, sometimes with young people you feel like you're beating them over the head, but then I have to take a step back and say, well, okay, then you can try it your way, but my door's always open when you have to come back and say, oh my gosh, it didn't work, what shall I do? So,
because I know that with my Right Fit method, which really takes a very unique look at how you present yourself in the marketplace when you're seeking a new position,
right.
people have lots of difficulty doing things differently.
Right.
If I'm coaching, let's say a VP about making a cold call or not sending out the resume first, making the cold call, then arranging the interview without the resume.
Right.
People have difficulty not doing things the old way.
No, listen, I had some interviews for my company this past week. I was hiring some new positions, and I was shocked at some of the people who came in for interviews. They came in ripped jeans and dirty sneakers and no resume, and it never ceases to amaze me. I don't know.
Well, when
first impression means everything, as you know.
Oh, absolutely. Well, when I wrote Win Without Competing, I talk about the things that employers look at when they interview you.
Right.
And I recall a situation when a CEO was interviewing someone in our office and started looking at his leg as the sock started to roll down the leg. Yes, he was absolutely mesmerized.
Uh-huh.
And that was the end of it because he couldn't
get
focus
past
on
the sock.
what the man was saying. He just couldn't. The man's leg was crossed, the sock was going down, and that was it. So, yeah.
That's so funny because one of the people that came in to interview me last week brought in their Starbucks coffee with them.
Oh, my.
And it was like I couldn't get past them every other word, sipping their coffee and staring at their coffee cup and then plunking their coffee cup down on the table while they were it was such a distraction to me.
Well, that's what it is, distractors.
Yeah, it was like I didn't hear a word they said through the whole interview.
Yeah, but that's a common thing. If a button is missing, whatever it is.
Dirty fingernails.
Dirty fingernails, messy hair.
Yeah.
Somebody has their cell phone on and it starts to ring.
Yes.
All of those things distract the employer. When I do a search, I present one candidate, the right fit candidate, so that person is flawlessly manicured.
Right.
And
so important.
Yes. In fact, Tom Lombardo, the founding editor-in-chief of WebMD, wrote the foreword to my book in which he describes how together we built WebMD. I had made 40 placements with him in the U.S., the U.K., and Canada with no replacement. And he always would comment about how beautifully dressed and groomed my candidates were.
Mm-hmm.
And
it's important. And, it's funny that you say that because in the young people that I mentor that are out trying to raise money for their projects, filmmakers, whatever the case may be, and at the festival, which I'm very adamant about, I tell people, if you're going to an investor's house or you're going to meet money people and you're trying to raise money, I call it the $200 day. Spend $50 if you've got an old falling apart car. Spend $50 and rent a really nice car for the day to pull up in. Go to a prop house and spend $10 and rent a very nice briefcase. Go to a secondhand shop and get a Versace suit that's $3,000 that's marked down to $75. Whatever it takes to present that the appearance is important to you, because everything should be important to you. Because then in turn, we'll know that our money will be important to you or our project will be important to you. So I really preach that. So important.
So I'm curious, did you say anything to the people that you were interviewing?
I said thank you very much, and they were out the door.
You weren't ready to start mentoring them, no.
At that point I had seen so many people, it just amazes me. But then it's kind of a breath of fresh air when someone does come in, impeccably dressed, and they've actually done research on your company before they come in. So they know about you, they know who you are and what you've done. I mean, that drives me batty. When someone comes in to interview for my company, they don't even know one movie we've made. So it's about being prepared.
Well, I think a lot of people aren't aware of the necessity of that. For some reason or other, they think it's just going to happen.
Right.
They don't understand. They have to take charge.
Right.
They have to manage the process.
Mm-hmm.
They have to package themselves to pitch. They have to show the employer why they are the one right fit.
Right.
Obviously, no one that you interviewed recently was able to do that because you said goodbye to everyone you interviewed.
Yes, pretty much. I think I ended up with one that was a possibility. But I also strongly believe in timing and right place at the right time. But you have to make that fate. And if you're not out there networking, if you're not out there being seen, if you're not out there, I call it, in the fish pool, you're never going to hook. And I think that is very important for young people. It's important for them to be out networking and going to any event that they can get into and handing out their business cards and collecting other people's business cards and keeping in contact with people, as opposed to sitting, putting an ad on Craigslist and saying, I'm a talented writer, hire me.
Right.
Do you know what I'm saying? So I really, and which I myself have had a lot of success as well. Networking is so important for young people, and a lot of young people don't do it.
Well, I think they're doing it via the Internet, through the social networking sites. But
don't you agree, Dr. Barrow, that there's nothing like a handshake and a face-to-face?
Well, that's what I teach when I do my coaching, and that's what I wrote about in the book, and that's what I do when I prep my one candidate that I send out for the interview. Absolutely. Right. I agree with you entirely.
Whenever someone says, okay, well, that's great, we'll email each other, we'll have contact over the phone, I say, well, you know what? Even if it's 5 minutes, I want to come by, stick my head in, and say hello. I want you to physically meet me and know who I am, even if it's for 5 minutes. I think that's huge. So,
well, I don't think there's a substitute for that. But
no.
I do think from having met people at all ages, especially people, let's say in their 20s now, many are very uncomfortable talking on the phone and doing the meet and greet that you're talking about because they've grown up in the Internet age.
I know. It's the Internet age. You said it. And, ironically enough, my one business partner that I did 10th and Wolf and A Month of Sundays and a couple other projects with, he was a very, very wealthy, successful businessman out of Pittsburgh. And I don't think we ever emailed each other once. It was always over the phone, always in person. He would handwrite me, barely legible notes and fax them to me. But, that was his way of doing business. And the guy was hugely successful. So whenever someone kind of criticizes me about that, I said, you know what? Some people like that. They like to see you in person. They like a handshake. They like that personal contact as opposed to just being somebody on the other end of the Internet.
Well, I agree with you. I mean, they want to connect, and that's what you're saying. But I think that we need to do something early on now with children to socialize them to want to connect so that they understand that just emailing back and forth is not going to do it.
Oh, no, I agree. And don't you remember, we didn't have, answering services or it's funny, I was just telling one of the kids in my office the other day, I remember having one phone in the house growing up and it didn't have an answering machine.
That's true.
If you weren't home, you weren't home. You had to rely on seeing people in person, and we didn't have computers, and who the heck wanted to stay inside? You wanted to be out doing things, and so it's a very different age. It's kind of the age of I'm not leaving my room for 3 days because I'm on Twitter or people tease me, they tell me I'm in the dark ages at my office, but I don't know.
No, I don't think so. But I also think that helps to explain the lack of pitching ability when you interview people and how they're dressing. Remember, they don't need to get dressed up to email people.
No, that's a very good point. That's a very good point. Well, how can we change that?
Well, that's it. We need to get together and discuss it.
Yes, there needs to be some sort of, which is something I ironically enough, I've been talking to some other friends about that are involved in the school systems here in LA. They don't really have etiquette classes or etiquette courses or well-being courses or things like that to sort of teach people, good manners and good grooming and how to be successful and how to get jobs and sort of how to promote yourself in the world. Nobody has that anymore. It's kind of
they
odd.
don't have it because they're functioning via the Internet.
Right.
Think about it yourself. There's like a protocol of how to do things using the Internet, and that has been the main emphasis. So
Right.
the in-person, which would be part of the larger picture, which would include the telephone, all the in-person networking, all of that has taken second place. So that's why the other is not being focused on, because people are trying to excel at using the social networking sites.
Right. And at times, too, I think it's just being a bit lazy also. It's easy to just punch a button on a computer and type in a message. It's not so easy when you're face-to-face with someone. So
that's true. But if you've gotten accustomed to it,
right.
I was really impressed today when I was working and so kind of ignored the phone as I was getting ready for the show, and then subsequently checked the voicemail, and a fellow had arrived to my office and wanted to introduce himself, who was looking for a job, someone in his early 30s, highly successful, and lives on the west side of Los Angeles where we're located, and actually came to the office to introduce himself. I, of course, called back immediately because I was in a state of shock. I couldn't wait to talk to the person who wanted to come in person to introduce himself.
I know. Oh,
yeah,
can you imagine that? I know.
Yeah, no, he was very well spoken, and we had a wonderful chat. So life is interesting, but we must talk about this further. I think that we need to work on something to help people do the kinds of things that they should be doing to be successful, not just in their careers, but also in their personal life.
Very much so. And again, I think sometimes people equate etiquette and, good grooming and manners with money. And listen, you can have not a dime in your pocket. Books are free. If you're a little short in the etiquette category, you can always go to the library, and get a book on etiquette. Or, there's such a wealth of information out there. I don't like the fall short excuse of, my parents are uneducated, so therefore I'm going to be uneducated. Or, my family doesn't travel, so therefore I'm never going to travel, so I'm never going to have that education. You can do whatever you want to do. That's the freedom we have as human beings. Whatever you want to do, you can do it.
Well, what did Erica John say? She said we create our own prisons.
Yes. Very much so.
There's no question. So both you and I believe we have no limits.
Right.
This is outstanding.
Hey, I have a saying, if you can walk and breathe, you can do whatever you want. And even if you can't walk, there's still plenty of things that you can do.
Because you're breathing.
That's right. So
now I'm curious. We've talked lots about your professional life, and we touched a little bit about, onto your personal life early on in the interview. Many of my guests who are soaked in passion have some difficulty balancing their personal and professional life. Many say that one runs into the other. What are your thoughts about this, Suzanne? I think you've just answered my question. What the hell?
Faithful question. What's the old saying? Behind every successful woman, there's at least 3 divorces. What can I say? That's an equation that I have till this day not been able to solve. I guess my advice for women who have a passion and want to be career oriented, as I had told you before, I kind of like the healthy selfish term. There's nothing wrong with wanting to put yourself not so much first, but wanting to fulfill everything that you want to do. Does that necessarily work in a relationship? Not always. Most of the time it doesn't. I think the what's the word for it? The 50-50 type thing in a relationship is very difficult when you have a passion for your work and you're very career oriented. Your personal life tends to have to come second to some degree, and that is very, very difficult for most men to accept unless they too are engrossed in a career that they indeed have a passion for and there's an understanding there. Otherwise, I certainly haven't been able to master it. It's very difficult.
Well, I've spoken with many young women who are moving up in their careers, who really are going through painful divorces.
Yes. Because
they're working round the clock and their husbands just don't understand it and won't accept it.
Right. Well, again, Dr. Barrow, it does come down to balance. And are successful women balanced? Probably not. You have to be very tenacious and very aggressive and somewhat of a workaholic to be a woman and get ahead because, unfortunately, a lot of women have to work twice as hard, sometimes to get the things that, I don't want to say that men get, but, we have to work very hard for things that we want. At least that's been my experience. And it's just not a good mix for personal. We all kind of joke with each other. Well, you have to get involved with someone in the military, so they're gone for 6 months.
Well, that's an interesting view,
yes.
A divergent thinking view. I like it.
Yes, they go out on the ship for 5 months.
They go out on the ship,
and then they're home for 2 weeks, and that's sort of the. I don't know. Me personally, I sort of like. Focusing on my work and doing things that I love and enjoy, and then looking forward to having that downtime with someone, whether it's one weekend a month or whatever that case is. But most men don't go for that. So
no, most men want you to be there on a daily basis.
Yeah, pretty much. Yeah.
Well, that's all right. You're a woman in charge, as they said on Blog Talk Radio.
I'd like to think that in some ways, but. Sometimes you fall a little short here and there, but, I think that's what makes life interesting. If everything just went, way too perfect, you might be a bit bored. So I don't know.
But I also think of you as a win without competing woman. You know your core identity. You are soaked in passion. You understand right fits. You compete with yourself and raise the standards against which you measure yourself higher and higher. You manage the process to achieve your goals. You think outside the box. Thank you for joining me today, and I really hope that you come back soon, Suzanne.
Oh, I certainly will. This was a pleasure.
Good. And I want you to share your upcoming movies with us.
Oh, I will.
In the near future.
I certainly will. It's been an absolute pleasure, Dr. Barrow.
I feel exactly the same. Please join me again next Wednesday, October 28th at 5 p.m. Pacific Daylight Time for a special call-in career show in which you can take my Assumptions Quotient quiz to figure out whether you are making erroneous assumptions that are impeding your career success. My guest co-host will be Virgil Holder, Corporate Director of Recruitment at the prestigious Piedmont Hospital in Atlanta. On Wednesday, November 4th, my guest will be Rachel Brill, Vice President of Development at Zoo Productions. In her current position, Rachel manages project development and production relevant to pitches, presentations, and pilots, including the Fox Primetime game show, Are You Smarter Than a Fifth Grader? And TV Land's How'd You Get So Rich with Joan Rivers. Archive shows. To listen to archive shows, please visit drbarrow.com, that's drbarro.com, and click on the date of the show description that interests you, and you will be connected to Blog Talk Radio. I suggest Ann Edwards, celebrity biographer, Pulitzer Prize nominee. Sherilyn Kenyon, New York Times bestselling author and queen of the vampire novel, according to Publishers Weekly. Jan Constantine, general counsel for the Authors Guild, who won the landmark copyright case against Google. I would love to hear from you. Please email drbarrow, that's drbarro, at winwithoutcompeting.com, or call 310-441-5305. To learn more about the Right Fit Method and my book, Win Without Competing, Career Success the Right Fit Way, visit winwithoutcompeting.com. For information about career coaching, visit drbarrow.com, and for search services, barrowglobal.com. Remember this trigger tip. Walk down the right fit road, and you will win without competing. Goodbye for now. This is Dr. Arlene, author, Win Without Competing, Career Coach 1, founder and CEO, Barrow Global Search, Inc.
Have you Googled yourself lately? Are there negative posts from an ex-employee or from a former client? Maybe an outdated news article? Search engines don't always get it right. But right or wrong, it's your reputation on the line. That's where Reputation Defender by Norton comes in. Take control with Reputation Defender. Their cutting-edge approaches help you to wipe away unwanted information in your search results. They also promote the good stuff. You can start by getting your free reputation report card at reputationdefender.com or call 800-811-4975 to speak to an expert.
Experience the warm and welcoming spirit of Fiji this winter with Fiji Airways Black Friday sale. Embrace the sunshine and fly nonstop from Los Angeles, starting from just $7.99. Don't wait, the sale ends soon. It's time to discover the beauty of Fiji and make your dream getaway a reality. Book now at FijiAirways.com or contact your travel agent. Conditions apply.